What's going on, everyone? This is Sheets, and we're going to be doing our look at the UFC New Jersey card for this coming weekend. And we are going to be doing an earlier look than usual, only because I'm going to be away and I'm not going to be able to follow up with the lineup construction video on Friday. So this is probably going to be the only look that you'll get from me at this. Um, and it is it's quite a card actually from a scoring perspective. You have plenty of favorites that can score a lot of points, not to mention the main event, which can score a lot of points. And unfortunately, you know, with a lot of big favorites, what that means is that there aren't that many great underdogs, just as far as just normal winning chances. So what you're probably going to end up having to do is play a couple of these mid-range fights, which it's not going to be particularly difficult. We'll get to those in a minute. And you're going to have to, probably snatch an underdog somewhere. It's a 13-fight card, so it's very unlikely that all of the favorites win. And the other thing is that it's not so easy to figure out which favorite is going to score the most because so many of these fighters have really strong inside the distance lines and I was about to say pretty decent ceilings, but I mean, they all have pretty good ceilings. Not to mention the main event with Morab. I mean, the guy scores 150 points every time he wins. So it's a very, very it's a very DFS friendly slate. I also think it is a slate where you can win this thing on your own without going too crazy. I mean, you are going to have to get the favorites right, and you are going to have to take some shots at some underdogs here, but I don't think that you're going to have to go too nuts to get different because there's just 13 fights and a lot of different options. All right, let's I guess go from the bottom of the card straight up, and we'll just use fight odds to use our props and figure out how to analyze this stuff. So I think the first fight that we have is Chinsky versus Maderos. And in the spirit of trying to make a big card small, this is probably one I'm inclined to fade. I mean, neither of these inside the distance lines are particularly good. You have Maderos at plus 175 at 8,900, and that's just not going to cut it on this card, as you'll see. And when we get to some of these other fighters, I mean, that type of inside the distance line is not great. He doesn't really have grappling upside to speak of. If anything, the Chinsky on the other side might have the grappling upside. It's kind of a weird case. I mean, I think he was a D3 wrestler. I think he was a wrestler by trade, but doesn't really do it in the UFC. So I just think this fight's probably a fade. Again, try to make the big card small. I think this is a good place to start doing that. All right, so now we're just going to start on a whole kind of just fight after fight of decent favorites and mid-ranges, and it's going to be very, very difficult to prioritize. So we're going to do our best. First one, we have Salid, Salkild, I guess, against Yanil Ashmus, and he, came into the UFC with big fanfare. I mean, he was 7,200 and he destroyed Patterson in like seemingly 5 seconds. Then he was obviously a little worse against Chris Duncan, but it's not like he got blown off the mat. And then he got 9 takedowns against Trevor Peek. So, I mean, I don't know why he's such a big underdog, but nonetheless, he is. And you look at the inside the distance line on the other side, you have the lead, that's what we're going to call him. Where is this? He's going to be one of many fighters that have very, very strong inside the distance lines. So Khalid inside is plus 160. This is actually one of the worst ones. Again, when we get through some of these other 9Ks, you're going to see a minus 300. You're going to have Morab that has an incredible takedown upside. I guess of all the 9Ks, this is probably, I would say the worst. We're going to get to Kwang or Kong in a second, but I don't know. Khalid at plus 160, he does have some grappling upside, I've heard, But I don't know. I mean, Ashmus had 10 takedowns. I mean, why do we think that Khalid is going to be or Salid is going to be the one with the takedowns here? I mean, 9,400 at that inside the distance line. I mean, I have to say I prefer the Ashmus side here. You know, and if he does in fact go for takedowns and gets a couple of them, he might be that underdog that cashes. You know, even if he loses. I don't know. I think if I had to pick between these two, I think Ashmus would be the one that I would pick, but probably is again kind of close to a fade here. And then you get Jusang Yu. You look at his inside the distance line. He is, let's see, is he at least minus 110? Yeah, so now he's minus 140 inside the distance, but it's you really have to pay for that. I mean, you have 9,500. I mean, 9,500, it's not good enough to be, I think, minus 120 inside the distance. You got to have a good first round prop. You got to have grappling upside. You got to have other stuff except for just a minus 140 inside the distance line. What is he round one? Do they have that? Let's see. Again, it's early in the week, I guess. Plus 250 round one. I guess that's reasonable, but I tell you, man, 9,500 on a slate where if Morab wins, he's going to score 150 is very, very tough. So maybe Quillen Scalide is a fade, or maybe just not a great play. And I guess the same with Jusang Yu. As far as playing Jekka on the other side, and he's plus 400. I mean, and that's probably the problem with playing Ashmus. I mean, these guys are only going to win the fight 15 to 20% of the time. So it's just kind of tough to play them. Speaking of which, you have Kang Wang and Ariane Lipsky. I think she's Ariane De Silva now. At least Kang is not 9,500. She's only 9,100. We don't even have it inside the distance line yet. We do have an under 2.5 rounds of about pick'em. So that does not feel like this is going to be such a strong inside the distance line for Kang Wang. And as a matter of fact, I think Lipsky is perfectly live here. I mean, she has a finish in her last fight. She's improved. And quite honestly, Kang Wang has not been so great. I mean, she knocked out Victoria Leonardo in a minute. That's not saying much. Then she got dusted as a huge favorite. And then her last fight, she was fine, kind of going to the wrestling, but it wasn't she was that impressive. So I don't know. I think this is unfortunately similar to the other two. I mean, you have a plus 400 underdog, so it's kind of tough to play her. But you know, you got to play some of these underdogs. So I think that Lipsky makes sense, but in no greater sense than Ashmus makes sense. And for that matter, I mean, why is Lipsky and Ashmus a good play at plus 400 and not Saragai? You know, so I think that people are going to talk themselves more into Lipsky and Ashmus because they have wins on the board like this. But I don't think there's any real difference between these three underdogs. And Wang, I honestly don't think there's much difference between these first three favorites either. So I hate to say fade the first three fights, especially considering what I said. I mean, you have 13 fights to choose from. But I don't know. I think that's not the worst idea in the world. Actually, we're talking about the first four fights now, right? Because you have the Chinsky and Maderos. Right now, I think the next one listed is going to be Chaos Williams and Gustafsson. And now I think we're kind of like getting in there because now you have a combination of a good inside the distance line. Like Chaos Williams is minus 110, and he's got a price that you can play. You know, he's 8,700. And normally what I like to say is if you are like 9K or 9,100, that's when you need an inside the distance line of minus 110. Here, I mean, he is very, very affordable, Chaos Williams at 8,700. And then on the other side of this, I mean, Gustafsson is very aggressive. He likes to come forward. He likes to get you in the clinch, and he could certainly pose some problems for Chaos Williams. And his winning odds are just very, very reasonable here at plus 160. I mean, so far we've talked about 3 or 4 underdogs that are like plus 400. There's just a really big difference between being plus 160 and plus 400. So I think both sides of this fight are really in play. So again, if we were trying to like prioritize or whatever, if you could close your eyes those first 4 fights and just hope that the favorites win without putting up such big scores, I think your lineups are going to be very much healthier from doing that. So I think you could start with this one, like Cass Williams and Gustafsson. I think you could play both sides of this. This next fight is like the ultimate and obvious must play because on a slate where you have such an incredible amount of big favorites, you'd like to think that these mid-range fights that do stand out as far as odds go are going to be priorities. And this one is no exception because not only is the pricing right here at 83.70, 900, but both of these fighters have incredible upside, okay, as far as their ability to score a lot. Like Sergey Spivak, I mean, if he gets things going with the takedowns, he could get 7-8 takedowns and score 125 points against Cortez Acosta, who has been known to give up a bunch of takedowns. And on the other side of this, I mean, Cortez Acosta, he's got a bit of power, and Spivak has been known to mail it in if things aren't going his way here. So Costa by KO, Costa inside the distance. I mean, it's even bigger. It's even more likely than Spivak. So this fight, again, is just kind of a must play. I don't know exactly which is the best side of this, but I find it very difficult to believe that this, fight does not show up in, if not all, most of my lineups. So again, this is a theme here. On slates where you have just these plus 400 underdogs or whatever, you have to try to find these mid-range fights that work. And Spivak, Cortez Acosta, Cass Williams, and Gustafsson, these are the guys that you're probably going to want to prioritize. And here we go. Now we have another one. So what's the difference between Azamat Mzakanov at 9,600 and all these other guys? Okay. First of all, one difference is the pure inside the distance line. Okay. And you look at it, his inside the distance line is minus 350. And that means that he is 3 times more likely to finish than any of those other favorites that we identified earlier. Okay. And that's a really big deal. However, one question that I kind of tiptoed around earlier was which of these fighters has like the bigger ceiling? So like if all right, fair enough. If Mzakanov, he's more likely to finish than these two, but what do those finishes really look like? Let's look at him like in round 1 for openers. In round 1, yeah, I guess that's the difference. He's a plus 130 in round 1. So that means he's almost a pick'em to score at least 100 points with upside from that. So that is the difference. And that's why Mzakanov at 94 and 9,600 is just going to be a better play than those other 3 favorites that we looked at earlier. So let's put him in. If we could afford him, great. Okay, on the other side, Ribero, I just don't think he wins often enough again. He's plus 425. However, why do I like Ribero if I had to, more than Saragai or Ashmuse or Lipsky? Well, the reason why is this. Because Mzakanov, whatever, his metrics look so good, he's just going to be very popular. So a win from Ribero at plus 400 is just going to carry a lot more weight towards making more money than a win from, Lipsky. I mean, all else being equal, presuming they all win with the same scores, which, again, it's tough to presume. But again, Ribero, he swings. I mean, I don't think Ribero's winning any kind of decision or anything like that. So I'm not too worried about it. So I think that Ribero is actually probably the best of the punts that we talked about so far. Okay, Josh Van against Bruno Silva. he's a minus 700. So this is the problem with playing Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva's plus 450. He's like the least likely to win on the card. It looks like. Well, actually, they're close. Um, it's very surprising because I hear people talking that Silva's live here, but listen, the numbers are what they are. Van inside the distance at plus 155. That's tough at 9,300. So what Van does make up for to some degree, he makes up for that in volume. I mean, he does put on a lot of volume, but he's also a slow starter. I don't know. Like at 9,300, Van does not seem like the kind of guy I want to play. All right, so now we get to like literally like 5 fights in a row that you're probably going to have to really consider playing. First, we have Kevin Holland versus Vicente Luque. And again, we have a much more favorable pricing metric here. You have 88 versus 7,400. And both of these fighters are very live to score well. Like Kevin Holland, his inside the distance line is minus 130, which is basically better than any of these guys that we talked about in the first 4 fights that were 92, 93, 9,400. So Holland is just an extraordinarily good player. Okay. It doesn't seem that way. You know what I mean? When you just like watch him fight, you think, well, he's just pretty much a pure striker. And, he doesn't really have too much grappling upside. He's not going to score 130. And maybe not. But that minus 130 inside the distance line is no joke. And you give me 95 to 100 out of him, his price, that I might be interested in. And then on the other side, I mean, like, Vicente Luque, I mean, he's got finishing upside. I mean, first of all, he wins the fight, not as often as maybe I would have hoped, but wins the fight a good, 30% of the time. Let's look at his inside the distance line. Luque inside plus what, 400? So about 20% of the time he finishes. So we don't have to worry about his score either. So when he wins. So Luque and Holland, again, another very key fight that I think you have to target here, along with the Chaos Williams fight and the Spivak. Moving on. Okay, the Patrick Mix, Bellator guy, all kinds of hype coming in against Mario Bautista. And you have favorable pricing. You have Bautista 7,700 versus Mix 8,500. So these are the fights you're going to want to target on these types of slates. And Patchy Mix, he's got like all kinds of wrestling, and this type of profile is just extremely strong DFS wise. He might actually have an okay inside the distance prop too, although I doubt it. I'm going to bet that it's not. I'm going to bet it's like plus 300. Let's see. Mixon's, wow, it's not bad at plus 220, given his wrestling upside. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty elite play, I think. And because, we play an ownership game, I think that Bautista probably will get some decent leverage against him. And again, he wins the fight often enough where you should probably use him. So another mid-range fight that's going to probably dominate your lineups. Mix Bautista, Holland Luque, Spivak Acosta, Chaos Gustafsson. Those 4 fights, I think, are the key fights. Outside the main event, which we'll get to. All right, so now we're getting back to a couple of more big favorites. First, we have Joe Pyfer. And, here's another one, like over 9K, very likely to win. Look at his inside the distance line. I imagine it's minus what, 150? I'm just guessing. Let's see. Pyfer inside the distance, minus 120. Actually, it's plus 120. Want to know why? Because Gaslam's really never been finished. So he's definitely in the mix, It's not somebody you want to just lock in or prioritize or anything like that, but he's certainly in the mix along with those other kind of, okay to moderately okay favorites. What's the difference between Pyfer, Khalid, Yu, Kong, and maybe a slightly better inside the distance line for Pfeiffer, but not too much. And I'll tell you this: I bet you Pfeiffer's higher owned than all those other guys. So, I mean, if I were doing a lineup construction video, I might even consider capping ownership on all these favorites, just because I mean, you don't really want to take a big stand on any of them. None of them are that much better than the others. And again, I exclude what's his name from this conversation. I think Mzakanov is clearly the best of ones we've discussed. But I think these others, between Pfeiffer, Khalid, Yu, Kwang, you could flip a coin with those, honestly. I think that Van, again, is just right there with those others, maybe a little worse. I'm not sure. So now we get to the 2 5-round fights, and this is the thing that makes this a little harder of a GPP slate, is because normally I would, as I said at the beginning, 13 fights is it's a lot, meaning that you probably don't need to go too crazy, but you have 2 5-round fights, and 5-round fights are going to take, a decent amount of ownership. The only thing I would say is that, I don't know, I was about to say that if Harrison really gets it going, she might not use all 5 rounds, but when you look at the inside the distance line here, you have Kayla Harrison. Let's see. Kayla Harrison inside the distance it's minus 150. It's not like it's that big of an inside the distance line, but she has a good inside the distance line. She's got all those takedowns in her, not in her back pockets, in her front pocket, because she's going to be going for them. And, if she can survive 5 rounds without getting tired, and she gets Juliana Pena on her back every round, I mean, that's like Morab territory, right? That's like 140, something like that. So it's a tough fade, except that she's 9,700. I think she's a very, very extremely good favorite. I think that her floor in her win is 100, maybe even more. How does she score less than 100? Like, ever? But will 100 be enough at 9,700? Probably it won't be. But very, very strong. She's probably going to be higher owned than some of these others, so that's a ding. And Pena, I don't know. She's just what does she win? I mean, 15% of the time. I mean, she just doesn't win often enough. And then you get to the main event, and I mean, this is the unfortunate reality here. I mean, fortunate for him is that every time the guy wins, he just smashes, except for one. Okay, actually, there are a couple. So there are a couple of fights that he didn't score all that well, but they certainly were not in 5-round fights. I mean, he's 120, 137, 167. I mean, these are 111 against Cejudo. That was in 3 rounds. I mean, it's just a little bit ridiculous. So he's certainly going to be the highest owned fighter on the slate. I imagine for good reason. The only thing I would say is that if in fact, oh boy, I'm trying to think of the variations where he wins and doesn't score. They just don't exist, because if O'Malley's good enough to keep Morab from taking him down, then Morab's just not going to win. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that Morab wins without getting 10 takedowns. So it's just kind of hard to fade him, except in lineups where you just play him to lose. Right? I think that O'Malley is normally, what I would say is that O'Malley is probably going to be overowned, just because 5-round fight underdogs are going to be overowned. And I could also make the case for O'Malley winning without scoring too much. Like, if he keeps Morab from taking him down and worked on his takedown defense and wins a striking battle over 5 rounds, he might only score 80, 85 points. The problem with that logic on this slate is that Morab is going to be so highly owned that you're just going to want that leverage, I think. So, unfortunately, I think this main event is going to be tough to fade. Would I play 100% over 150? I don't know. You know what? Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't do it on purpose, but if I got there, I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, it's just the combination of Morab's ceiling with O'Malley's leverage if he wins. I think makes it very difficult. So, what do you do here on this card? I mean, I think you avoid if you can, like those big plus 400s. But can you even do it? You know, I think you can. I think that you can avoid playing these plus 400 underdogs if you really just commit to these mid rangers. Like if you play Luque or Gustafson, Acosta, those guys, even Batista. Then you don't have to gamble on those plus 400 or plus 450 underdogs, and that's what I would recommend. So that's pretty much all that I have for now. Again, if I do find time to do a lineup construction video, I'll fire it up. I just don't think I'm going to. That's it. Hope everybody has a good weekend, weekend, and see you next time.